Hi, everyone. As you probably saw from the title and thumbnail, we are doing something different, but we still need to do an intro, of course. So I'm very thrilled to be joined by someone who has a long history with comics and DC in particular, and Batman, but so many other things as well. We also have Swamp Thing, Superman, Justice League, Dark Knight's Metal, and Death Metal. Of course, also his own work, American Vampire, Noctera, Claire, Witches, so many things. And he's very busy, and we've been able to cobble out some time to be able to come and discuss DC All In, Absolute DC, and all those things. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Scott Snyder. So thank you so much for taking
No,
the time.
no, thank you, Sasha. I'm sorry it's been hard to do. It's mostly that my kids are going back to school, so it's chaos here with three boys, as I know you know with kids. It's just like
No, same over here. It's just been a lot as everything settles down, but it's good. It made me feel good that
right?
we were having the same things at the same time. Like it's not
I
just me.
know. I was like, I can't go do it today because my kid went to a concert and lost his phone, and I'm at Verizon, and there's no glamour. Like I'm not Batman. There's no Bruce Wayne life. It's just this. So yeah,
Speaking of Batman, how does it feel to be back working on Batman?
it feels great. Honestly, I mean, we can get into it. Like, I'll sort of pitch you all in before talking about myself, I think, in Batman. But
Mhm.
like, I sincerely love the book. I really do. You know, a lot of my time on Batman, like the first few years, honestly, was spent in like complete abject terror. Because I was really plucked out of obscurity. I mean, I always wanted to be in comics. I broke in really luckily from books where I was pitching. You know, I wanted to be in comics the whole time. I wanted to be an artist, but when I got in, I had like I was lucky enough to sell American Vampire, and then just a couple issues in, this huge spot opened on Detective Comics, and I think they weren't really concerned with who was on it, and they needed somebody quickly because Grant was doing Batman, and that was like the
Mhm.
big stuff. And so I was on that. And then when the next year, just as I was getting used to Dick Grayson, who's super easy to write as Batman because he's always like scared and excited to be Batman. And I was like, that's how I feel. We're gonna get along great. Um, they were like, you want to do Batman Bruce Wayne and do number one? And I was like, I think I should quit. And my wife was like, you cannot, that's your dream job. So the feeling I usually equate it to is like if you were playing single A baseball or something, or you're like little league, and then they're like, "Hey, kid, pitch in Game 7 of the World Series today," and you're like, "What do you do?" Because it's your dream and you can't turn it down, but at the same time, you feel like vastly underqualified. So those first few years and much of my time on Batman, I mean, I was so honored and thrilled, but I was so scared the whole time of screwing it up, and I was learning so much from Greg, who was just such a great mentor, and it was the best experience of my life work wise. But I didn't have a lot of confidence until later in our run, and then when I was doing some of the final stuff. And so with
Mhm.
this, it feels wonderful to come back of my own choice, know that this is a crazy swing and something really different, and just love the book and feel like it's okay. Like it doesn't I'm just not scared at all this time. I just love what we're doing and feel like it's some of the best work I've ever done, but mostly it's the joy of being back on a character just with exuberance and not scared to screw it up in some way because I'm done with that part of it.
Mhm. We were talking a little bit before, and I thought it was interesting about just the difficulties of making a big swing like this. So can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry for everyone. I was like talking Sasha's ear off even before we got in. I feel bad. Like you get me going, you can
No,
ask me
don't.
like one question and I'll go on and on and on. But yeah, so like all in, I'm gonna give you my pitch. So when I when I left DC in 2020, I'd been there for like 10 years, right? Almost. And every year I fought for a carve out to do independent stuff. And they would give it to me, like when I had an exclusive contract. But then I wouldn't use it because I was so buried. And it was a really chaotic place, to be honest, for a lot of that time. There was and to no one, not throwing anyone under a bus. I mean, there were issues with people, but mostly it was the fact that it was being absorbed into bigger and bigger companies. Like DC Comics when I started was like paper, comic pages on the wall, La Bullpen, in New York City, 53rd Street and Broadway. And then within a couple of years, it moved out to LA. It was on the Warner Brothers lot, and they had a big office that was all glass comic book pages and this. and there was the integration into TV and film. And so essentially, like, where it came from was this feeling essentially that throughout that period, I felt like, we tried a couple big initiatives while we were going, where an initiative is a little different, right, than like an event. It's when the whole company comes together to kind of define itself and invite everybody in to say, listen, we want to remind you who we are. We want to remind you why comics are great. And we're just going to invite everyone in, for fans, retailers, all kinds of incentives. And the first one we did was the New 52, right? And that was wild, and I was, again, like, just brand new and terrified. But the idea was to do everything new and invite in all new fans. And a lot of us were really worried about that because it kind of did away with a lot of the legacy and connective tissue that made DC special. At the same time, it was really exciting because it was like everything can be sort of reinvented. And with Batman, I was really, really traditional, but still, there was excitement around that, and it brought all these people in. It was like the biggest sales success, and there was all this energy and a lot of criticism, but it was exciting. It made comics exciting. And then again, like a few years later, we went the other way and tried Rebirth, which pulled back from that sense of kind of reinvention and tried to really reestablish legacy and classic. And that was a big success. And that was wonderful to be a part of. But so what happened was, like, when I was done with DC, I was like, look, I need some time away, right? Because it was a lot. Death metal and metal, and it was at a moment when everybody was there was a lot of chaos because of the corporate machinations about who was going to be the new boss and what was happening and who was getting fired, and just a lot of that stuff that people don't know. On the outside, I think sometimes you just don't know what's happening inside of a company like that. And so anyway, like, when I left, I was like, I just need some time away. And so when I was away, and by the way, you can tell me to shut up anytime. I can be like, you're just going. I asked one simple question, but what happened was, like, while I was away, it was so fun to get to do all this creator-owned stuff that I'd had in my head all those years, where I got the carve out to do them, but I just never did them with all these creators I wanted to work with. But I started to read superhero comics for fun, right? I was like, this is, and it was a really good moment. It was like Nightwing, Immortal Hulk, going back and seeing Venom, a bunch of stuff, World's Finest. But it felt like the cultural conversation was this thing that was like, superheroes are dead, they're over. There was like podcasts about it and autopsies on because of the MCU, there was this feeling of superheroes have reached their saturation.
Yeah.
Yeah, fatigue, exactly, right? And so it started to be like this idea in my head where DC was very nice to me about, do you want to come back and do a book? And Marvel was nice to me too about, do you want to come do a book? But I was like, you know what I'd like to do? I don't really want to go do a book, but I'd like to be a small part of something that was like those initiatives, like the New 52 and Rebirth. But while those ones were kind of like all new or going back to legacy classic, what if we just did them at the same time and celebrated both kinds of superhero storytelling and invited everybody in for the biggest party we've had? And we created a space for both things. And we tried to do everything as a jumping on point. Like, starting in October, what if every single book started a new story or a new arc within their continuing story? So every single book would be a welcome to new readers, to readers that have been reading. It wouldn't be a disruption. There'd be no retcon, no renumbering, whatever. And that was the idea. And so it was 3 years ago. It was 2 New Yorks ago, and the third New York's in a month.
Yeah.
And so I was like, look, what if we did this? And a bunch of people, Josh Williamson was really on board with it. James Tynan, who's like, my best friend. Like, I talked to him and Greg and Josh. And I was like, what do you think? And they were like, look, if it's fun and they can do it. But the hard thing is, you're finally answering your questions after. Back when we did the New 52, it was still like the early days of being a part of a bigger corporation, right?
Yeah.
And so you had more mobility. You could try things, and you see this in the old events and initiatives. Secret Wars, Secret Invasion, Crisis, all like Final Crisis. I love for its bonkersness. You could do these things and create big moments around the whole line, very nimbly, because you were just you. But when you have more and more bosses and you're part of a larger and larger corporate, cosmology, it becomes harder because the people at the top don't know sometimes, if there's a huge changeover constantly, what the bosses want. And it makes them legitimately more concerned about, can I do this big swing? Can I risk a lot? And so you see less and less, I think, of that by nobody's fault, but just because you're part of a larger corporate system. And there are tremendous benefits to being part of that system too. There's an integration into TV and film and animation and all
Mhm.
kinds of stuff that have been really fun to see. But that's the problem, right? Like it to me. That's why you don't see as many like everybody at once, let's all do something fucking crazy. And sorry,
Mhm.
you know what? Nobody ever curses on your channel. I feel like I don't want to be the R-rated.
They do, like, sometimes.
Okay, I'll be
You're
careful.
not
I'll
the
be
first.
careful. I'll watch my language. I escape a house with like three boys, one of which is five, and I like a sailor suddenly like "Rah." But but it's only like 10 in the morning, so I gotta
It's
or
too
but
early for that.
right? It's just this is all Jameson, but no, it's actually it's coffee, I swear. But the and so it was fun. So this is why to do all in, right? It was like because I talked to Tom King, he was really funny. He's a good friend too. And I was like, "What do you think?" And he was like, "You sure you want to like why do the heavy lift? Like why go in there? Why don't you just do a Batman book, you know?" And I was like, "Look, I'd like to be a part of something, you know. I'd like to be a part of something like this." And he was really awesome about it. He was like, "Then let's do it." And so the fun was like let's remind people how awesome DC is, but superhero comics in general, you know, Marvel
Mhm.
too. Like, let's show them that the best stories live in comic books, and they have been living here. This is where the characters are renewed. It's where the greatest tapestry of storytelling has been going on for 100 years almost with these characters. Let's celebrate all of it at once and invite everybody in and honor the longtime fans and the new
Mhm.
fans without alienating one or the other. And so I went to Jim Lee. I like flew out to LA and went to Jim Lee. And Marie Javins is like one of my closest friends. You know, she was my editor on Metal. We go all the way back, and now
Mhm.
she's a wonderful editor in chief now. So she was like, "Look, you want to take the swing? Let's do it. Why not? How long are we all going to be here? Let's do it." Meaning, like, not how long is DC Comics going to be here? It's going to be here
Mhm.
forever. But like you never know how long you're going to be at a company or how long the editorial staff will be there, how long, you know, they
Mhm.
find other jobs, you know, people move around, people stay, who knows. But the fun was like we're here right now, all of us, right?
Mhm.
Like Jim and I, you know, Jim is I'm lucky enough to call him, you know, a friend, and Marie is a friend. And I love the editorial staff there. We go back, like some of them we grew up, you know, in the
Mhm.
same way. And so the fun was like, while we know each other well, like while we're in a neighborhood that likes each other, and we have bosses that are like, you know what, kids, like go for it. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm old, but still, it was like, let's do it. Let's do it together. Why not? Let's try it. You know what I mean? And if it fails, it fails. But instead, we'll go out swinging and try something fun. And so it became like, all right, we decided we were going to do it 2 New Yorks ago.
Mhm.
And it was like, it's going to take a long time to make sure that every creator feels comfortable like starting a new story, you know, because when you're writing 5 months ahead, you know, 4 or 5 months
Mhm.
ahead. So to make sure everyone had time to sort of figure out how they could honor the arc they're doing, either continue it but start a new jumping on point. But by October, somewhere either October, November, December, every book was needed to start something new. So that
Mhm.
way we could just every week roll out new stories.
Mhm.
And we had big, you know, a summit, and I went out there and gave a whole pep talk to the company in a fun way of just like I know we're in like a building that's like not the old building and this stuff, but we're DC Comics. You guys are awesome, you know. Like let's have fun. Let's show them who we are. And so that's what this is. Like that's all in is essentially an invitation to all fans, like lapsed, continuing, new, to come in and remind you or to discover why superhero comics and DC Comics in particular have always been awesome, but are more awesome right now than ever. And we're going to offer you everything where there's a universe, the absolute universe, where the characters are radically reinvented, incredible creators. And then we're going to offer you the best, like, epic storytelling possible in the continuing universe without retcons or reboots or anything. But there will be some creative changes where people wanted to get
Mhm.
off books and try new things. There will be some new books announced. Every month you'll see some new books. There's some I can't wait for you to see. And
Mhm.
all of it kind of centers around this idea that you get both. You get over here, Justice League is back. It's Justice League Unlimited. So it's this big, robust, connective, central book. Mark and Dan just killing it. Their story is so awesome, whether you see it. And then on the other side, you've got this universe where the characters are brand new and isolated and dangerous and strange.
Mhm.
And so you can get anything, you know? So that's
How
it.
does it
Like,
feel, like, to be now finally, after all this time, unveiling it and putting it out there?
it feels great. Honestly, it feels great. I feel so proud to be just a small part of it. I mean, I've been in initiatives and events, and again, like, I told Sasha before this, like, you can ask me anything. I'll say when I can't say something, but
Yeah.
I enjoy this shit. Like, I like going on places and talking off the cuff about stuff to DC's chagrin a lot of the time. It's true. Like, I got in trouble at San Diego, but the fun of it is I believe in it, and I'm telling you the truth. Like that,
Hmm.
I honestly feel like my connection with my fans has been. I try to be as honest as possible. I don't go out there. I'll tell you, like, if I don't think. I mean, when I do a big thing, like, I wouldn't go out and shill for it if I didn't love it. But I also have
Hmm.
been lucky enough not to do shit that I don't love, like during the
Hmm.
time. So I feel great about it, not because it's the Scott show, and that was very important to me that it's not about me,
Hmm.
but that I'm an advocate for all of these great books that people have made with their editors, with their own creative choices. And my job, like, so they hired me as essentially a consultant and Josh to be able to make a story that would allow for the universe to do this, to come out of absolute power and sort of become a duo-verse where the multiverse still exists. It's not like just destroyed. But essentially, like, what happens is the energy of the universe gets locked into the main universe and a brand new scary universe, like, dangerous,
Yeah.
wild, chaotic, fun universe. So we created a story and presented it to everybody and said, look, this is the launch point in October. It'll be DC All In, DC Universe All In #1. It comes out in October, the first week, and it's a flip book. So you can read one side Superman, the other side Darkseid. They come together. It's really fun. It
Hmm.
was a total headache for for printing and for all that, but I love it. I think it's awesome. And the works everybody did on it is killer. But it announces who we are, and it says, like, this is the beginning of a meta story that will go for a year plus about Darkseid and our heroes and these two universes. But what
Hmm.
it won't do is force anyone to do anything they don't want to do in the main universe or in the absolute. Like, it was designed to give everybody room to tell their best story. And when I met with everybody, or met with creators involved in
Hmm.
stuff, the thing was, take your biggest swing. The one thing I ask is, like, don't go in there and half-ass it. Don't go in there and play it
Hmm.
safe. Don't go in there, not just with the absolute universe, but the
Hmm.
main one. If you're coming on Nightwing, Dan Waters in it, like, what's your Nightwing? Like, how do you own it? What is it? If you're
But
going on detective,
there are
yeah.
still limits though, right? Like in terms of like how big you can swing. Like how far can you take the swing?
In
Like did
which,
it
well, in the main universe, like, yes,
Mhm.
there are limits. Like, you can't be like, I mean, unless your editor is like, sure. But, like, in the main universe, the limits are that it is a continuation of the universe that you guys have been reading. So
Mhm.
there's no huge seismic thing where there's no change in continuity. No 5 years is stolen. There's no, like, there's no shock that you'll open up a book and things will be changed in a way that isn't in
Mhm.
story from the book forward. That said, some books, like, especially ones that are starting, and I don't know what's
Mhm.
been announced yet half the time, so I feel like I don't want to spoil stuff and be like, this book that there will be some books that take characters in new directions based on the stories up to that point. And there's some books that will really continue the success of the books that are going. Like, Superman, for example, has been a
Mhm.
big hit for us with Josh, and Dan Mora is coming on the other side of it, and
And it
everything.
was
But
Campbell before, yeah.
yeah, right. Sorry, Jamal Campbell, and also because I think he had Rafa Sandoval for a bit
Mhm.
too. But Jamal Campbell, yes, was awesome when it started. I'm just reading the next arc now, so I forget who's.
Mhm.
But what's coming with it is it's a continuation of the story, but it really takes it to an exciting place. So you can jump in and be like, I haven't been reading Superman, but I can start right now. So that's kind of the tenor of the main universe. You can't do anything. There's no, like, oh my God, we're breaking the characters or changing the characters. But there's a desire to look at continuity, which is the way I was brought in, right? It was like,
Mhm.
look, Dick Grayson is Batman. He has the money, he has the thing. That's your starting go. Everything else is
Mhm.
fair game. So here it's like that, where it's like, look, you can't suddenly say Nightwing is a different character. You can't say Nightwing is in a different situation, than existed, unless you
Mhm.
explain it in some way that makes sense. But most people, what they wanted to do was just take something that was they love and carry it forward in their own way. So there are just a lot of really good books, man. I mean, from Catwoman and a lot of the stuff happening over
Mhm.
there to the big books, like Chip's arc on Batman is really great. Like, what Mark is doing with Justice League is insane. Tom's Wonder Woman goes, like, crazy big. So it's fun. Like, it's just
Mhm.
that's the way it feels to me. is like, let's rock out, let's have fun. You know, it's a stressful fucking moment in the world, like
Mhm.
all around for everybody, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, no matter what's going on in your life. So comics is a place to not really even to escape, but to sort of play out your biggest hopes and fears in a way that feels fun. You know what I mean? And feels epic.
What was the biggest swing that you took with yours, if you can say?
Oh, I, I'll give it to you. I'll send it to you. It's going to be lettered in like a week, and I'll send it to you so you can see it. But it's a really big swing. Like no
Mhm.
bullshit. Like Absolute Batman is a big swing in a lot of ways. Like you can see it and tell me if I'm exaggerating. But the biggest swing, so Absolute Batman. So how I came on Absolute Batman, just so you can like, I'll give you that too. And am I talking too much? Also, by the
No,
way,
no, you're good. It's interesting.
you sure? I don't want to be like
Yes.
boring you out of your chair, Sasha. I feel
No,
like
I'm
I never
interested.
get invited back. You know what I mean? So.
No, I love
Mm.
hearing all of the how things come together and the behind the scenes and just the attitude around everything. I find it really fascinating. So
Okay, good. You can just text me and be like, "This is not fascinating." If it's not, and I'll like get off of it. You know. But so what happened was we created this story about Darkseid and how Darkseid realizes during Absolute Power. We work with Mark Waid, and Darkseid realizes, although it's not in Absolute Power, it's just in the DC All In #1. It flashes back to Absolute Power and what happens with Darkseid during that event, and he realizes that his whole existence something has been off. He keeps doing the same thing and it's not working, and he has an opportunity to do it, like to attack with Calabac and Granny Goodness, and they've got this whole army of not just parademons but para all kinds of stuff. And he's just like, I don't want to do that. I want to. I know there's something wrong, and I have an idea of how to figure out what it is. And he goes on this quest and realizes that if he does this drastic thing, he might be able to become this ender of all things, a new god to the new gods in this bigger way.
Mhm.
And so Josh and I came up with this story, really happy with it, pitched it out. We started talking to editorial about people coming in the main universe. Josh, was really involved over there. And then they said, okay, let's make this absolute universe that I've been thinking about for a while. Because I love the Marvel Ultimate Universe, man. I've always loved it. I think what John
Mhm.
is doing with it right now is awesome. Like, I mean, I love Ultimate Spider-Man, but
Mhm.
the only frustrating thing was like I said, we pitched all this 3 years ago. So then the Ultimate Universe started, and I was like, but
And then
it's
it looks
fine.
like, yeah.
It's okay. You know what? It happens all the time. It's happened while I was at DC many, many times. Like if you look at it, like Secret Empire is evil Cap, Metal evil Batman. Like you just happen to have things in the zeitgeist sometimes, and it's
Mhm.
it's okay. But that said, like I love what they're doing over there, and John is a friend, and I give them incredible credit. And everyone should go pick up Revenge by my brother from another mother, Greg Capullo, and John, which is awesome right now this week. With the Absolute Universe, it was like, okay, well, what do we do? Like, what's important about it? And for me, it was a chance to be like, what I loved about the Ultimate books was that they reinvented the characters in moments that felt like they were making them exciting. It wasn't necessarily about engaging them in any, like they were talking about, that specific moment, like 9/11 or this. It was more the feel in the air of making the hero brave in the face of fears that felt appropriate for that moment for kids. Because that's the Dark Knight was like my first, not first comic book. That my first comic book was the Hulk versus Batman, Len Wein,
The
Jorge Garcia
crossover.
Lopez.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I still, my parents still have it. It's got like crayon and stuff on it. But the Dark Knight was the comic, like many people, that made me like, I want to write comics in this, and it was because this Batman felt like he was going up against things that I was afraid of as a kid in the 80s in New York City, right? Like I was afraid of the decline of the city, but I was afraid of nuclear war. And here's Superman with the Russian missiles. And I was afraid of all these things that he was up against. And so
Mhm.
being able to do something like that felt, that was the impetus. So I created a template for Batman where I was like, this is the kind of thing we want to do, but I don't have to do any of them. Like I can just do the book with Josh, this one shot, and
Mhm.
I'll take whatever book nobody wants in the absolute universe, you know, or whatever book like we don't populate, like, or whatever book we need, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So that was like very, and so I went to Jason Aaron pretty early, and it was also up to editorial. It was like, are there people that you've identified that you want to go to and talk to? And so it wasn't just like me going around, but so some people you'll see also there are people that like have been announced, but I don't think have gotten a lot of notice, like Pornsak Pinochet, Dennis Camp, who I love, who's killing it over at Marvel, and Shea Grayson, who I think is just a rising star in comics. Jason I know, and we're friends, and I was like, look, I knew he was doing stuff with DC at that time. What do you think about kind of architecting this with me a little bit? And we started talking about, I told him this template for Batman, and he was like, you know what? I really like Superman. I want to try Superman. I was like, great. And
Mhm.
so then I went around and I talked to a couple more people that DC identified that I did about Batman. And so ultimately, we found a creative team for Wonder Woman with Kelly, who I love, and Hayden, who's incredible. And then it was like, look, Batman is open, and it was James Tynion who had been telling me all along, like, are you sure you want to do this big thing at DC and this? And he was living his best life in the indie world. And,
Mhm.
he's like my little brother. Like he was my student, when he was an undergrad, and I was like an adjunct teacher. I hadn't even broken in yet. And he was like, you have to do you should do the Batman one. And I was like, come on. And he was like, you should do it. Like, you love it. You made it up, and I was like, I don't know. That's like the scariest one for me, because I would never try and like touch the stuff that Greg and I did. I mean, I'm so proud of it and I love it. And it's so personal to me that going
Mhm.
back to Batman is the one that's the scariest. Like, why would I do that? I've had to be clear, like that door is open a lot. Like it's not hard for somebody that's written Batman before with DC and had a couple things that have gone over okay, to be able to go back and do it again in small ways. Like, it would be easy to go back and be like, can I do a Black Label book of Batman or do this?
Mhm.
But to do it in this way would be like, so I don't want to, I just never wanted to do that. So to go back now and be like, all right, helming an ongoing, because it's an ongoing, I mean, it's
Yeah.
13 issues already planned out, was scary. And it was like, but I was like, all
Did
right, well, oh, go
did
ahead.
you find yourself trying to avoid certain things you had already covered in, like, your original run?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like the whole goal was like, just do not do anything you did before. And I'm sure there are echoes, like, because it
Mhm.
is a commentary in some ways on a different thing, right? I did an origin once before that I'm proud of with Zero Year. But it feels new to me. It was like, how do you do it in a way that feels like nobody sees it coming? Like, just
Mhm.
different, you know, on every level. And the first choice was like, who do you partner with artistically? And so Nick Dragata, who I loved from East of West, love at the End of the World with Jason Aaron right now. And, we were friendly because I really respected him in the indie. He started a program called Creators for Creators at Image,
Mhm.
which has us Image creators donate money to support new talent coming in,
Mhm.
and to support a book. And so I got to know him through that. And I always really loved him, and thought, like, you know what, this style, it's so kinetic and different. It looks nothing like Greg or anybody I've worked with. And it's got
Mhm.
this kind of dangerous energy. It looks kind of like if Mazzucchelli and manga, like, what, like
Yeah.
crossed. What? And so I called him up, and I was walking around like right out there and I remember calling him and being like, if he says no, then I can say no. Like, if he says no, I can turn it down. And then he was like, fuck yeah, I love it. Let's do it. And I was like, oh God. So from that point, it was August. Yeah, it was July or August of last year. So, over a year ago. And from that point, I was like, all right, so I know you're in LA. He's like, no, 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 I'm back here. I'm in Connecticut. So he lives right across the sound. The ocean is like right outside that window.
Mhm.
And he takes the ferry over, and he just comes to my studio, and like we actually, like, he
Oh,
just tapes
nice.
stuff up on the wall and things, like all I took them down so nobody would see them in case, but now I'm gonna just show you all, like, it's like he just like, look at they gave this is the way Bruce looks, not with that shaved head. This is him for it. But like, this is his designs to figure out the cape,
Mhm.
where he's like how to do it, and he walks on it, and he started coming over and we started working on it here, and it's been such a different and wonderful experience to just be face to
Mhm.
face and make something together. And I mean, he's all in. Like, we're an ongoing creative team. It's not
Hmm.
going to change. So
Was that name on purpose so that like there's a slight punnage with all in, or is it just like the concept of being all in? Because I have to always fight not to make like all in jokes whenever I talk about it, like in a good way. But
we went through some, like, that was the first name. That was the very first name I came up with Josh Williamson and James Tynan. If you go back and like you my this there's somebody that was doing a thing on a channel that was like, if we go back and look at the pictures on social media, and they got it all, they got it right, where they were like, this is where they
Mhm,
must have met, because they're at the New York offices. But it was the very first thing we came up with, and we're like, because the feeling was like, we had a meeting with sort of marketing, and they were
mhm,
like, well, what demographic do you want to appeal to? It was like that kind of a feel.
yeah,
Like, who are you trying to appeal to? And it was just like, everybody. Like, I don't, what's the why do we have to do that thing where it's like it's only new readers, or it's only this? Why don't we just try and appeal to everybody?
mhm,
And so it was like, let's just go all in. And it was like, all right, let's do it. And there's a lot of pushback. There was some names pitched. There was a lot of other names, like Best of Both Worlds, that got pitched. It was like, I was like, that sounds like a Hallmark movie. And there was another one that was like, Revolution, Evolution. And there's just a lot of we tried a lot of things, but we just came back to it, where I always loved it, because it was like, Jim was really funny, because Jim and I both like to gamble, but he was like, it's just like, it's like poker though. It's just like all in. I'm like, exactly.
mhm.
Yeah, it's good. Like, and he's like, but superheroes gambling. I'm like, yeah, superheroes gambling, wrestling. What? It's awesome. Like, why not? Right. So all in, that was the title. And then Absolute came from honestly, like, so they were like, I told them, I went out there, and when I said I was going to do Batman, I flew out to the office, and I pitched them the whole first issue with
Mhm.
layouts. So I was like, this is what this is. And they were like, oh, they were like, what do you want to call it? And I was just like, I don't know. I want to call it something that sounds like Batman. Fuck yeah. And they were just like, you can't call it that. And I was like, Batman is fuck, Batman. And they were like, because they were all laughing, we were all, but it was just like, what do we do? And I was like, well, what if we use an acronym? What if we did like, and Jason was there. He was awesome. He was like, let's do AF. And I was like, AF, like, and they were, you saw legal, like, legal, like, brains, their face. And it's like, come on, let's have some fun. Let's do it. Why not? It's corny. It could be a little cringy, but who cares? Like, go out for it. And it was like, okay, well, what if we call it Absolute, but DC Absolute Frontier, and then it would be AF, right? And that's
Mhm,
why it was like, literally, like, this was like the very first, and it was
mhm.
like, but we got it like all the way to the finish line, and they were just like, DC, the higher ups were just like, there's no way we're going out with AF. So I was like, all right, well, Absolute. And then the compromise was that if it's called Absolute, I can make ads, or we can do ads that do like Absolute Fury, Absolute Frenzy, Absolute Fanfare, Absolute Fight, and then like do the AF off of that. And
Mhm.
like, so I'm holding them hostage to do a trailer that does that stuff for all the characters, because Kelly, me, and Jason, who were the first to sign on, and then it was Al Ewing and Jeff and Lemire, and such great
Mhm.
people involved. I'm really excited. It was like, okay, they all were like, yeah, man, that's the feel of it, is like, you're going hard. It's going to be like Batman AF, like,
Mhm.
so that's how that came about, the Absolute name. The fun of Absolute is that Batman, I mean, I had this idea a while ago, where I was like, look, I mean, I love Batman. I love classic Batman. It's my favorite character, not just in comics, but like in literature.
Mhm.
But that said, like, there are things I've always wanted to try that you couldn't try, right? Where like, and in the Batman run I did with Greg, and all the stuff that I've done was about my fears. Batman, that I know, becoming a hero to stand up to the things I'm afraid of, right? So like, some of them were really personal and intimate, like death of the family is like when we were having our second kid, and I was
Mhm.
like, my career was taking off. My wife and I never expected to make any money. I always thought that I'd be, when we got married, I was like, look, I love what I do, but I don't think I'll ever bring in a big paycheck. But when things started going well for me, and I was on Batman, out of all things, and it was the second year, our lives were really upended because she's a doctor, you know, she had a
Mhm.
real job, and it was like, I can't stay home and take care of these kids. Like, I need to do this, my chance. And it was really hard. Like, it was
Mhm.
really like, how do you manage this? And so Death of the Family is about a dude, Batman, who has a demon in his head, Joker, who's like, you don't really want to have a family. You just want to be a workaholic with me. You just want to go back and be me and you forever, just young. Like, we're
Mhm.
both mortal. Like, let's just do it. You don't want to have these attachments. And so sometimes it was those fears. Sometimes
Mhm.
with Zero Year, it was about fears that I had for my kids. Like, the Riddler is sort of like terrorism, where he takes over a whole city, and there's, you know, there's the climate. There's all kinds of like coded
Yeah.
stuff in there. But when we're done, it was like, well, what if I did Batman written not my fears, but what I see my kids afraid of, the way my
Mhm.
kids feel. You know, how do you do something that's adult but for them? And for them, they want a hero who isn't a multi-generational billionaire. They want somebody who's like, instead of being order in the system, is chaos. Like, they want someone who comes in and is the monkey wrench and shows you that, you know what, maybe the systems that exist are not good enough. Like, maybe we can make something better. And is not
Mhm.
part of those things intrinsically because he's, you know, he's benefited from them from a long time, but instead is someone who is up against that stuff. And I
Mhm.
was like, well, if you do that, if you think that out, it inverts everything. You know, it starts to invert everything about him, where he's a guerrilla fighter, he's on the ground in Gotham, he has nothing. He doesn't have to wear a suit, so he doesn't have to be, he's a no one, so he can be huge. Like, because he's just nobody. He's just you know, he's worked all over the city, he's worked in the sewers, he's worked in the power grid. He's super
Mhm.
smart. He's worked as, and he's an engineer now on buildings because he hides stuff everywhere. But if
Mhm.
that's the case, he can be giant because he doesn't have to pretend to be anyone because he's nobody and everybody. And then it's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, how does he build a Batmobile? How does he do this? Does he have a cave? Like, and every little thing starts to be like, that's exciting. That's exciting. Then I was like, well, what if, you know, his villains, who are they? Well, he would have grown up with them. They would have all grown up in Crime Alley, most of them, you know, because most of them are from Gotham and they know him
Mhm.
coming up. So what if he knows it? What if he's friends with them as kids? What if you come up with them that way? And like,
Mhm.
all of it just started to be like bang, 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 you know?
Mhm.
And that's how it came about. And I was like, how would he form? What would make him? What would his mission be? How would he decide on the bat? How would Alfred be? Who is Alfred? Is there an Alfred? Like, it just was like new. Everything was new to
Mhm.
me suddenly. And I was like, that's, and I ran it by my kids, like my 17-year-old, you know, who's, I was like, look, is this cool? You know, and he really liked it. But I would have done it anyway because there's done many things he thought was not cool. Like, I saw your one on Batman Who Laughs, where by the way, I never expected that character to have that sort of exposure at all. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't have any control if they put him in Fortnite or they do that stuff, or but it was the only time like my kids were like, for all of the overexposure and the shit that like in comics was like, oh, we're so sick of him. I totally get it. But it was the one time my kids thought I was cool those years ago, where they were like, my dad made this thing in Fortnite. So I'll take it. I'll take the hit on Batman Who Laughs being overexposed and whatever. But he really
Well, and
loved
now
it.
it's a meme, like, for the Batman Who Lives, like, it just keeps going.
I know, it just keeps, you know, but that's the joy of it, is like, you know, it's, look, I mean, there's a lot of things you don't have control over. Like, you know, when you make these characters, like, I don't have control over quarter vowels, right? So like, if somebody wants to use them, if they want to put them in a video game, God bless. Like, you know, Batman Who Laughs, like, if that takes off and they want him in these things, this game, this, that, like, I can't control that, you know, and that's okay.
Mhm.
You just celebrate it. DC has been very kind to us about involving us, just letting us know when that stuff happens, at least, so you can be like, okay, here it comes. But with this, like, he sat with me and my 13-year-old, and I was like, look, this is what I want to do. Do you like it? If you don't, I'm still going to do it, but I want to see if you like it because I love it. And they were more excited about it than anything I've done, so it made me really happy because it was just, he just feels wild. He feels like a primal beast in Gotham, like a force of
Mhm.
nature, you know, just, and Alfred comes to town. I love Alfred. Is like my Alfred secretly is like the point of view. He's like the Dark Knight kind of character, where he's like, he's led a long life of compromises. He's in MI6, and he's super badass, and he's got stash houses, and he comes to town after being pulled off a target that he's been hunting around the world. to monitor this kind of activity in Gotham, not Batman, but this like crime, this super spike in crime that's going up like 600%. And he does not want to be here, but his daughter happens to be here, but she never doesn't want to talk to him. I'm giving way too much away, but he's jaded, and he's like,
Mhm.
these were the first pictures of Alfred. Actually, I think this is right. Yeah, this was like his design for Alfred. And Alfred really feels like, look, that's the way of the world, is you do the best you can. But he comes up against this young guy. Batman's only like 20, 21, but he's all, just nonstop energy. But Bruce really believes that he doesn't care. He's going to bang his head against it and change things in his way.
Mhm.
And that idealism starts to rub off on Alfred, and
Mhm.
that's kind of the point of view of the
The
book.
dynamic.
Yeah.
Why did they show him with that shaved head on the
Oh,
instead with his hair?
it was Nick's first. When Nick
Mhm.
was first just getting his size,
Mhm.
he drew him that way, and then I was like, actually it looks a little similar to the way we did in Zero Year with the cut. So
Mhm.
I'd rather do something a little more modern, too. And all my kids, they all have that kind of longer hair now. So it's like, let's do that. It was honestly just a mistake. They showed the wrong slide. They showed the wrong slide, and yeah, there were a couple of things like that. But again, like, God bless them. They're awesome. DC's awesome. So no complaints here.
How is it? Because like you're obviously really excited about this and you're trying to do all of these new things. So how is it when, even though it's out there and it is like said, like this is something different, when there is still pushback of like, oh, that's not Batman, like that's not my Batman. Like how do you respond to that?
I try my best. I mean, like, one thing to know is that, like, for anyone out there that ever wants to write a superhero, especially a big one, you get all of that stuff always. Like, I know sometimes people have gotten it way worse. Meaning like there are horrible moments where there's a really sort of toxic response sometimes to things in comics. Um, but in terms of like what I did when I started on Batman, oh my
Mhm.
god, man! Like, people yelled at me all the time online on Twitter back then, because why? Who was I to get to take detective? And I made Jim Gordon's son, a psychopath.
Mm.
I ruined his character. Worse than year one. How could I make him this? He's a terrible father now. How could I do this to him? Like, really, I'm never reading Batman again. I'm writing DC. I hate you, all of that. And then when I did
Mhm.
Court of Owls, I got it like twice as bad. Who are you to do Batman number one? I didn't like your last thing. And by the way, you're giving him a brother, and you're making him look stupid. How could he not know that this is there, that Court of Owls is there? And when I did Zero Year, I mean, that was the toughest, because I mean, like, the fandom grew, like the positive grew,
Mhm.
but the negative was always there. It's always there. There was a whole channel. I remember there's a channel devoted to how I sucked. My friend was like, I won't say which creator, but was like, Look how funny this is." I was like, "Fuck you," like, that's not funny, but they thought it was great. So anyway, but the it's always been there, and you just respect it and say, look, I mean, not respect it, but for me, it's their right to have that conversation. I don't, I used to sometimes engage in my own way to try and say, like, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I don't have the time or energy for it, honestly. And
Mhm.
it's always counterproductive, and it feels like punching down. It was a learning curve for me, where that happened years and years ago. You just have to let people say their stuff and just assume that the work is gonna, be okay. But I mean, for me, like, I got when I did Zero Year, I mean, I got the death threats. Someone left not we didn't live where I live now, but we lived in Stony Brook. Somebody left a letter in my mailbox that wasn't addressed. Like, they knew where I lived. They found out where I
Mhm.
lived somehow and left it. Then my wife found it, and it was like,
Oof.
you ruined the character for me. And the implication was just like, I know where you live. It wasn't like I'm
Mhm.
going to kill you. But and so I'm just saying, like, it's just it is unacceptable. It shouldn't happen when it becomes toxic and threatening. 100%.
Mhm.
Like, there should be guardrails against that in all kinds of ways. But when it comes to people just voicing their opinion and saying, I hate this, or this isn't for me, like, go right ahead. Like, that's your right. And there should be places to do that. You should be able to say that. And great. If you say it to me, I might not respond to you. I used to be very, when I started, I was very, like I told you, I was, I've always, especially as a young person, like, dealt with anxiety and depression, and struggled with those things at times.
Mhm.
And those first couple of years on Batman, I lived in like a state of panic attack constantly, where it was like, you know, I sat down to type and it would be like, "You're gonna write that line." The voice in your head was like, and that's what there's in Endgame. The voice in my head is the Joker.
Mhm.
That's where that story came from. But it was like, you're gonna type that line. That line sucks. You're nothing. You're not worth this. You're a piece of shit. Like, what are you doing? Panic attack.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna get up, walk around the house. Okay, I'm gonna sit down. That line's even worse. What are you doing, you idiot? And so, you know, back then, those comments, I had to learn to block them out because it take
Mhm.
one to just send me on a spiral. So
Mhm.
I think I've developed a relatively good skin for it. But ultimately, again, like, the thing I'd say is, like, if you don't like it, that's fine. I'm sorry you don't like it. I promise, like, I love it. I'm doing my best. I'm not doing anything to like hurt Batman. You can still go read, classic Batman is going to be awesome with Chip and Jorge,
Mhm.
and they got a great arc coming. And you have Batman and Robin Year One with Mark Waid. You got a totally different one with him and Samney, which is going to be
Mhm.
incredible.
But
So
overall, like, how have you found it? In terms of reception, because you've been going everywhere, like all the cons, all of that stuff. How's the energy been? Have you been feeling like fans are excited about it as you guys are?
I know it sounds like bullshit or I'm blowing smoke, but honestly, like, it feels fantastic. Like, and they might just be saying that to me. I haven't been going to cons that much over the last few years, so it might just be nobody wants to come up and be like, "This sucks." But it's been great. It's been great. I mean, I think the honest truth again is, like, all we're trying to do is create a jumping on point where we celebrate all kinds of superhero comics at once. There's no forcing you into one thing or another. There's no saying we're only this kind of company right now or that kind of company. It's saying we're offering you everything, this huge buffet of superhero stuff at once. And some of it you might love, some of it you might
Mhm.
not. But, like, if you've ever had a desire to get in the store and read superhero comics, here's the door flung open at a moment to make it as welcoming as possible. And there's a lot of things in it that are, I think, aren't, maybe I don't know that they've gotten a lot of attention yet because it really comes down to like ordering. But for example, like, we had to argue, we lowered the variant thresholds a lot, like retailer variants. So instead of being to get your own store variant, it's 3,000. We lowered it to 1,000 below.
Mhm.
We did, like, we're doing these cards where the first 5 weeks of All In, starting with the All In special, because it's about Justice League coming back, and the story is sort of how the Justice League card is made is one of the themes of the issue. Batman does the hardware, Superman does like alien tech, Wonder Woman does
Mhm.
like magic encryption. Each week, if you go into the store, we're going to send retailers these really nice cards. The first week is Batman Justice League card. It's got like Batman tech. The second week is Superman. Third week is Wonder
Mhm.
Woman. And there's some surprises in the fourth and fifth weeks. But if we're going to send them to them and be like, "Hey, anyone that buys like 3 or 4 DC comics of any kind, doesn't matter what they are, give them one of these cards." It's to encourage people to be like, "Hey, thanks for reading any of our comics." And,
Mhm.
doing that, and if you get all 5, you get a special thing and all kinds of stuff. It's just like, it's meant to be celebratory. That's the whole
Mhm.
goal, is to get people in stores every single week to thank retailers, like, by making ordering easier, by giving them incentives so that every time they, again, they can hand things out every week and say, "Did you get all 5? Did you get this? Like, do you get that?" Every single book is a jumping on point. There's every kind of book. And we're going to do a lot of signings and a lot of, I'm doing it now, like signing this print with everybody that if retailers, want, they can get, and all kinds of stuff. So the goal is to make it like, when we did Metal, it was fun, man. Like, it was like, you might hate the story, you might love it, I don't know, but it was a celebration at that time, at a moment when, I mean, if you have to cast your mind back to like 2016, and it was like 2016 we did Metal,
Mhm.
2020 we did Death Metal, and 2024 we're doing All In. So it's
Mhm.
always like a really chaotic moment. And part of the fun with Metal is like, let's do something that celebrates the bonkers lunatic 100th birthday of Kirby fun, and reminds people we're all in it together. And that Death Metal was a celebration of like, every story you've ever read in comics is in continuity. It all
Mhm.
matters. Welcome. And this one is saying, listen, like, let's invite you in with enthusiasm and welcome and excitement and joy and happiness, and say superhero comics are for everybody. There's every kind of comic. we're all starting new stories, we're all united, we're all as a company proud of what we're doing. Let's do that. So that's kind of, it feels good. It feels really good. Like, again, like I have my nights. I called James. James he's in like Athens, and I was like, forgot it was super late there, and I was like, what if this all fails? What if it's a total flop? You know? And he's like,
Mhm.
go to bed, go to bed. But like, you know, that's the fun. I've always felt that way, you know, where it's like it might not work. Like it was always, but it's about, you know, these characters mean a lot, you know, to me, but to billions of people around the world. And if you get a chance to do something on them, when I
Mhm.
teach, like with the class that I teach, you know, the two golden rules are like, you've got to write the story that you would like to find that day more than any other. And you've always got to be the most exciting creator on the shelves to yourself, you know, and that feeling of being like, you get on these characters, take a swing. That was what we were saying to every creator, take a swing. Like, it
Mhm.
doesn't mean you have to change the character, you always have to be true to core, but it means, is there a villain you've always that represents your fear right now? Is there a villain in continuity you've always wanted to try because you have your best story for? What is that thing? What is your take? So my son is like wandering outside, not the 13-year-old, not the 5-year-old, but and it was like, what is the take, you know? Do it. Like, let's do it, let's do it. I really hope people understand there's no again, like I have the witches stuff, I have, you know, distillery and a lot of indie stuff. Like,
Mhm.
there's no reason to do this except for fun, for the feeling of honestly being like, I'd like to be a part of something I'm proud of while the people I love and know at DC and respect are still there, and want to do this. Again, there's no danger of them leaving tomorrow, but
Mhm.
neighborhoods change, you know what I mean? And it's just like, you know, growing up in the city, like neighborhoods change, you know, and it's just
Mhm.
like that feeling of let's do something while we're here together that we can be like, we did that crazy thing for comics and for each
Mhm.
other.
Is this your favorite Batman thing you worked on?
I can't say that. That's like, that's no, they're all my children. That's like literally like no, but I definitely I would tell you this, like it is I would stand it as something I'm as proud of as anything I have done anywhere. Like, you know, on Batman, on anything else. Like, you know, I love it, and
Mhm.
you know, I could be totally wrong. You might read it and be like, this is the worst thing Scott's ever done. But I don't feel that way. I really I try very hard, like, you know, again, like the creators that I like best, you know, are the ones that I follow the most closely. They try things that you don't expect. You know what I mean? Like they push themselves into areas where it's like, I don't know if they can pull that off. Like, you know what I mean? Where it's like, what are you doing over there? And trying to do that for myself here is fun.
What would you say is the biggest risk that you took before this in terms of ideas that you put out there?
Wow, that's a great question. Sasha, you put me on the not prepared for this. Um, I don't know because they all felt risky at the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like doing the origin over of Batman or leaving DC to do creator own, that felt really risky. Um, I think Witches, the biggest risk in story, Witches was the most personal book. I wrote it, I work through themes, you know, the things that I'm thinking about across multiple books. So you'll see, like, if you look at everything I do within a year or two, they're all kind of mining the same idea, but from very different ways. So, like, I'll do a prose thing like Book of Evil that mirrors something else but with Witches, it was like death of the family. Those two were probably the ones that were scariest because they were so deeply about my fear as a dad of being a terrible father, of not knowing if I was ready to have another kid, wanted to have another kid, if I was too selfish, if my career was more important to me than my children, if I was going to destroy everything by mistake or on purpose. Like, so those books were the scariest because they were so autobiographical. And I know it sounds crazy because it's like death of the family with Joker with his face cut off, but it was the first time because Court of Owls was me being autobiographical, like, but it's like it's very on the surface. It's like Batman, you get on Bruce Wayne and it's like you're suddenly terrified of all the history and the legacy and the you know, that you're not good enough. You just got confident on Dick Grayson and now here you are. And so Court of Owls is like Bruce Wayne feeling super confident, being in the city, being like, I know this place. And all of a sudden, the history comes alive and says to him, you're nothing, you're a speck, you're nothing. So that was autobiographical. But the first time I really put my own, like that,
Hmm.
if my wife read it, my kids read it, it was more, those books were that, and I do it more now. There are books I have coming out, like, the I mean, Batman is really personal in that way too. This new one, Absolute Batman. But the book I'm doing with Jock right now is personal in that way. It's called You Won't Feel a Thing, and it's about a guy who's at the end of his life prematurely. He has early onset dementia, and he was like a mind hunter kind of detective. And there's one case that's always eluded him, but it's about a lot of things I'm dealing with now. So
Hmm.
yeah, but I mean, those Jock is always a great partner for those books because he's the one that's like, you've got to we're just such good friends. He was the first star to ever take a chance on me, and he's always the one that's like, put yourself in it, put yourself in it. So anyway, yeah,
Hmm.
those were the scariest, those first, because the first time I was like putting myself into these characters in a real way, and then putting myself on the page and witches
Hmm.
in a really forthright way.
No, like I think it's all very interesting, and I think people are going to be really excited to see it. And I hope that everybody gives it a chance, just at least a try to see whether it's for them or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, and again, like, look, no harm, no foul. If you try it and you don't like it, no harm, no foul. If just don't want, you come in and give things a shot at DC, you don't like that's okay. Like, and you can say it. You can say it to me. I won't. And I'm not gonna. I don't. It's not about taking offense. It's about, the one thing I can promise you is it is a sincere try by all of us to make something that we hope you'll love, like across the board. You know.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to discuss it. I know that we're getting close to about 12 and stuff, and we have to hop off and do things. I want to say thank you for taking the time, and I'm sure everybody else feels that way. And of course, leave all your comments and questions and all those good things down below. So thank you.
No, thank you, Sasha. I really appreciate it. It's great coming on. And I would just want to say again, like I said this to you off the air, but thank you for your channel. Like, I mean, I've been a fan for a while now, for over a year, and a lot of pros I know watch it. And you're rigorous, you're enthusiastic, you're critical, all of that stuff. But your passion for comics really shows through, and we appreciate it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much to everyone who stuck around to the end, and who thus also witnessed my inability to process a compliment. Thanks again to Scott Snyder for coming to chat with us. October sees the beginning of the Absolute Universe. Are you all in? Let me know all your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see you guys again soon. Bye bye.